you ever noticed how certain people only seem to hold on to the worst parts of your story, no matter how far you've come, how much you've transformed, or how many battles you've fought and won? They keep bringing up who you used to be. And if they continue to do this, here's what it really means. They don't recognize your growth. They ignore your healing. They just keep circling back to the version of you that struggled, fell short, or lost control. But why? It's like a wound that's finally beginning to heal, only for someone to walk by and scratch at the scar, just to check if it still hurts. Or like chains you broke free from long ago, only for someone to quietly gather those broken links and try wrapping them around your ankles again. Because the truth is, some people aren't interested in who you've become. They're far more invested in who you were. Your evolution forces them to confront parts of themselves they've never faced. And while they're busy dragging your past into your present, you're left with a choice. Do you defend the old version of yourself, or do you boldly step into the new one? When you choose growth over guilt, that's where the discomfort begins. So, how do you handle people who won't let go of your past? Stick around, because by the end of this, you'll understand the truth behind their behavior, and more importantly, how to rise above it. Number 1, they haven't healed themselves. Let's start with one of the most revealing patterns: those who constantly bring up your past. These are the people who remind you of who you used to be, the mistakes you made, the things you did or said when you were in a different headspace, living from a different place in life. And no matter how much you've evolved or moved on, they continue to tie you to that earlier version of yourself. At first, it may seem like they're just being real with you, but the truth runs deeper than that. When someone can't stop bringing up your past, it usually has less to do with you and more to do with them. The reality is, instead of embracing your growth, they cling to the memory of who you were, because they haven't done the healing work themselves. They haven't moved forward, so they don't want you to either. Your progress becomes a trigger. Your healing reminds them of the parts inside themselves that are still broken. And instead of facing their own pain, they project it outward. They try to anchor you to your old identity so they won't have to confront the discomfort that your evolution brings. This is where Stoic wisdom helps us. Seneca once said, "He who clings to pain cannot walk forward." Think about that. If someone keeps dragging your past into the now, it's because they're still carrying unresolved pain. It might be guilt, jealousy, resentment, or fear that your growth will leave them behind. But whatever the reason, that burden isn't yours. Let me tell you about someone I know. We'll call her Ela. In her early 20s, she made some rough choices, got caught up in toxic relationships, and lived through a lot she wasn't proud of. But she worked hard to change her life. Therapy, self-reflection, rebuilding from scratch. Yet, every time she ran into people from her past, especially one childhood friend, they'd mention those worst moments. "Remember when you used to," or "Wow, never thought you'd pull it together." Always with a smile, but the sting was real. Eventually, Isla understood what was happening. That friend wasn't trying to connect. They were trying to anchor her to a version of herself she no longer identified with. Not because they cared, but because her growth disrupted the image they had of her, and more importantly, of themselves. So how do you deal with this? First, don't argue. You don't need to prove you've changed. Your life already does that. Second, protect your peace. You're not obligated to maintain relationships just because they've been around a long time. And third, walk boldly in your growth. You don't have to carry the weight of someone else's inability to let go of your past. That chapter is done. And if they're stuck rereading your old pages, that says more about where they're stuck, not where you're headed. Keep healing, keep evolving, and let them stay behind if that's what they choose. Because you're not there anymore. Number 2, they use your past to control you. Let's move on to one of the most manipulative reasons why someone keeps bringing up your past. They do it to control you. It's not about simply reminding you of who you were, it's about shrinking you down emotionally. It's about making you feel smaller, less worthy, less capable. They're uncomfortable with your growth, so they use your past as a weapon. They dig up your lowest moments not to reflect, but to tether you. Not through love, not through friendship, but through guilt. Here's the truth. Weaponizing your history is a tactic designed to keep you emotionally weakened. If they can influence how you feel, they can steer how you act. It's emotional leverage. You'll hear things like, "Don't forget where you came from," or "After everything you've done, you think you're better now?" But those aren't loving reminders. They're chains. The goal? To trap you in a cycle where you're constantly trying to earn back acceptance. That's not transformation. That's submission. This is where Epictetus brings clarity. Do not hand over your peace to the judgment of others. Because once you let someone define your worth through your past, they gain power over your present. And with that kind of power, they'll manipulate your choices, diminish your confidence, even distort your identity. But here's the key. They only have the power you give them. Take Jason, for instance, a man I know who had some rough patches in his early years. Poor choices, broken relationships, regret. But he did the work. Therapy, rebuilding, inner peace. Still, a family member never let him forget. Every step forward was met with, "We know what you're capable of," or "Don't mess this up again." For a while it worked. Jason shrunk. He second-guessed himself. He felt like no matter what he did, he'd always be that broken version. Until one day, he realized, if someone can't see your growth, that's their blindness, not your truth. So he stopped defending himself. He stopped performing for acceptance. And just like that, their words lost all power. So how do you protect yourself from this? First, recognize manipulation for what it is. If someone brings up your past to make you feel small, they're trying to control you. Second, stop explaining. You don't need their permission to transform. And third, protect your peace. You are not who you were, and you're not obligated to be held hostage by anyone who refuses to see that. Number 3, they fear your growth. Let's dive into one of the most uncomfortable truths. Some people bring up your past because they're afraid of your growth. They see you evolving, gaining clarity, building strength, and becoming more confident. And that scares them. Why? Because the more you rise, the more they're forced to confront their own lack of progress. If they aren't growing, your evolution becomes a mirror they're afraid to look into. Your momentum threatens the comfort zone they've settled into. So what do? They pull you back. They try to reduce you to the version of yourself that felt familiar to them. The one who was confused, broken, or unsure. Not because they truly care about your past, but because they feel insecure about where you're headed. If they can tether you to the person you used to be, they don't have to reckon with their own fear of being left behind. Marcus Aurelius said, "The one who seeks your past fears your present power." And that's exactly what's happening here. They don't want to witness your strength. They don't want to acknowledge your transformation, because that reflection reminds them of their own stagnation. They'd rather keep you small, not because they don't believe in your growth, but because they're terrified of their own lack of it. Let me share a story. A guy I know, let's call him Eric, grew up in a rough environment. He made some serious mistakes in his youth, but over time, he turned it all around, earned a degree, started a business, and built a life he was proud of. But whenever he caught up with old friends, the narrative never changed. "Remember when you got arrested?" Or, "Man, I never thought you'd come out of that mess." It wasn't harmless joking, it was subtle resistance to his growth. At first, Eric would laugh along, but eventually he saw through it. They weren't celebrating how far he'd come. They were clinging to who he used to be because his progress made them uncomfortable. His change reminded them of the changes they never made. So how do you respond to this? First, realize, it's not your job to shrink just to make others feel secure. Second, stop trying to prove anything. Your life already tells the story. And third, keep moving forward. The people who fear your growth were never meant to grow with you. Let them stay where they are. You've got places to be. Number 4, they refuse to accept the new you. Let's talk about one of the most frustrating experiences on your growth journey, when people simply refuse to accept the new version of you. You've worked on yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You've evolved. But some people still interact with you as if nothing has changed. They talk to you the same way, joke at your expense the same way, bring up the same flaws as if your transformation doesn't exist. Why? Because accepting the new you means they have to update how they view you, and that requires effort. It forces them to grow too. And many people just aren't ready for that. They'd rather keep interacting with the outdated version of you because it's familiar, it's manageable. The new you, your mindset, your boundaries, your clarity, that all disrupts the role you used to play in their life. And instead of adjusting to your growth, they pretend it never happened. This is where Stoic wisdom shines. Epictetus once said, "You are not bound to who you were. Grow with reason, and let the past be dust." You don't owe anyone the old version of yourself just because it's more convenient for them. Your transformation isn't a problem. It's proof of your strength, your discipline, your purpose. Let me share a story. A woman I know, we'll call her Emily, did a lot of deep work on herself. She overcame anxiety, left behind a toxic relationship, and embraced the powerful person she was meant to be. But every time she met with old friends, it was like none of that happened. They still joked about her being too sensitive, still teased her about crying over everything. It was subtle, but it was constant. They weren't seeing her. They were seeing the outdated image they had of her. And the more she stepped into her power, the more their discomfort showed. Eventually, Emily understood. This wasn't rejection of that, who she was. It was resistance to the change she represented. And that wasn't her burden to carry. So how do you handle this? First, stop asking for permission to grow. Second, don't play small just to make others comfortable. And third, walk confidently in who you've become. The people who are meant to stay in your life will evolve with you. The rest will cling to your past because they're too afraid to face your present. Number 5, they don't respect your journey. One of the clearest signs someone doesn't truly value you is when they reduce you to a version of yourself you've already outgrown. No matter how much you've changed or how far you've come, they refuse to update their perception of you. They define you by your past and completely disregard your growth. Here's the truth. If someone can't acknowledge your evolution, they're not respecting your journey. True respect means honoring the work someone puts into becoming more than who they once were. When someone brings up your past, not to understand but to judge, they aren't being honest. They're trying to control the narrative. They want to box you in, to keep you in a role that makes them comfortable. A smaller, more predictable version of you. This is where Stoic wisdom reminds us of what really matters. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Judge not the man by his past, but by the direction of his stride." That's the essence of growth. What counts most isn't where you've been, but where you're going. People who truly respect you will recognize that. Even if your path isn't what they expected, they'll accept your evolution, not resist it. Let me share a story. A woman I know, we'll call her Sarah, went through a lot growing up. She made some serious mistakes and faced some dark seasons, but she didn't stay there. She did the inner work. She found healing. She built a meaningful, grounded life. Years later, when she'd go visit certain relatives, they'd still say things like, "Wow, you've changed. We remember when you were such a mess." Or, "Don't forget where you came from." It seemed innocent at first, but eventually she realized they weren't acknowledging her growth. They were trying to keep her small. So how do you deal with people like this? First, stop trying to convince them. If they refuse to see who you are now, that's their blindness, not your burden. Second, set boundaries. If they don't respect your journey, they don't deserve front row seats to it. And third, walk proudly in your evolution. You don't need anyone's validation to keep moving forward. You've earned your growth, every step of it. Don't let someone who's stuck in your past hold you back from your future. Number 6, they want to keep you stuck. Let's take a closer look at one of the most subtle, yet deeply damaging tactics people often use. They bring up your past not to understand it, not to find healing in it, but purely to keep you stuck inside of it. Every time you try to take a step forward, they remind you of the time you fell. Every time you begin to find your voice, they echo back your mistakes. And the truth is, it isn't done out of concern or care. It's about control. Here's the reality. When someone constantly brings up your past, they're trying to anchor you in guilt. And the longer you carry that guilt, the more likely you are to stay quiet, to question yourself, to hesitate. You become afraid to grow too boldly, to shine too brightly, or to dream too big. Because somewhere along the way, they convinced you that you don't deserve it, that you haven't earned the right to move beyond what you've done. But make no mistake, that's the game. They don't want to see you rise. They want you to remain right where you are, or where you were. And this is where Stoic wisdom becomes your sword. Epictetus said, "Guilt unearned is a chain forged by manipulation." Let that truth settle in. Not all guilt is yours. Sometimes it's been handed to you by people who benefit from your silence and submission. If they can keep you buried under the weight of who you used to be, they get to dictate who you're allowed to become. But here's the truth they don't want you to realize. Your past may explain you, but it no longer defines you. Let me share a story. A man I know, let's call him Daniel, had made his fair share of mistakes. He'd taken accountability for them, done the inner work, and rebuilt himself. He was now grounded, clear, and proud of who he'd become. But his older brother refused to see that. Every time Daniel expressed confidence or chased something new, his brother would remind him of his failures. Comments like, "Funny how you think you've got it all figured out now," or "Don't get too proud." We all remember the old you. And for a long time, it worked. Daniel would pull back, second-guess himself, feel undeserving, until one day it hit him. That guilt wasn't his anymore. He'd already carried it long enough. If someone still needed to hold it over him, it wasn't about truth. It was about control. So how do you deal with people like this? First, recognize the manipulation. Real accountability leads to growth, not lifelong silence. Second, release the guilt that no longer belongs to you. And third, move forward with strength. You don't owe anyone your stagnation just to keep them comfortable in theirs. You cannot rise if you keep holding on to chains someone else made for you. Let them fall and keep climbing. Number 7, they're testing your emotional weak spots. Now let's discuss one of the most calculated and unfortunately common reasons someone continues to bring up your past. It's not about nostalgia. It's not about honesty. It's about testing you. Here's what's really going on. When someone keeps referencing your past, they're often trying to see where you're still wounded. They're not looking to understand or hold you accountable. They're looking to provoke a reaction. To see if you'll flinch, if you'll shrink, if you'll still carry shame over the parts of yourself that you've already outgrown. It might come in the form of a subtle joke, a casual dig, a passing comment. But it's strategic. Because if they can trigger you, if they can make you explain, defend, or doubt yourself, then they know they've found your pressure point. And once they know where that is, they'll keep pressing it. Especially when they feel insecure, threatened, or jealous of who you're becoming. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes your shield. Marcus Aurelius said, "He who cannot be provoked holds the highest power." And that's the truth. The more unshakable you become, the less power others have over you. When they can't push the old buttons, the game ends. Because real power doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it's silent. It's calm. It's stillness in the face of someone who's trying to rattle your peace. Let me tell you a story. A man I know, let's call him Alex, had done serious work on himself. He used to be reactive, quick to anger, easy to provoke. But after years of therapy and inner growth, he developed real emotional discipline. But every so often, an old friend would throw out something like, "Don't get too zen now. Remember when you used to blow up over nothing?" At first, Alex wanted to defend himself, prove that he wasn't that guy anymore. But then he paused. He realized this wasn't about reconnecting. It was a test. That person wasn't honoring his growth, they were challenging it. So Alex chose silence. No reaction, no defense, just stillness. And in that stillness, he kept his power. So how should you handle people like this? First, spot the pattern. If someone is consistently trying to trigger your past to get a rise out of you, recognize it for what it is, a test. Second, practice emotional stillness. Not everything deserves your energy. And finally, protect your peace like it's sacred. Because it is. In the end, your strength isn't measured by how loudly you defend your past. It's seen in how gracefully you've outgrown it. And once they realize they can no longer provoke you, they'll stop trying. Let's continue learning and evolving together. Thank you for being here. What are your views on this? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I will personally read all of your comments. And if you seriously want to level up in life, don't forget to show some love by hitting the like and subscribe button. Stay strong. Until next time.